everyone, it's me, Anaya, and Tarot. um, Today I'm finally doing part 2 of the little series I was doing about my most recent pregnancy and miscarriage. If you haven't seen the video about the pregnancy, I'll try and remember to leave like a little link to that there, but also if it's not there, just the most recent video other than this one on my channel. But today we're going to talk about the miscarriage. I have some notes here so I don't get confused because a lot happened. So if you see me looking down, that's what that is about. The reason why this video took so long to happen was because this miscarriage lasted a lot longer than my last miscarriage. Both I did naturally with no medications or D&Cs, right? Um, it's just my preference on how to miscarry. My mentality was that I wanted to birth my babies naturally, and if I wasn't going to be able to birth them, I just wanted to give them the most natural experience possible. Um, so yeah, I'm going to give a really quick overview at the beginning of this video, and then I will get more detailed for people who want to stick around and listen to that. But to start, essentially, I found out that I was having a missed miscarriage at my ultrasound on January 5th, which would have been around like the 10-week mark. And then I started cramping and bleeding just a couple days after that ultrasound on the 7th. The main part of the miscarriage happened on January 11th. It was a lot shorter this time than the last miscarriage. The last miscarriage, I was having painful contractions for at least 5 hours, whereas this time it was only 20 minutes. So I thought that was really interesting. What else should I add in the quick sum up? I had to do a lot of blood work, at least once a week, to continue to check my HCG levels because we wanted to watch them decrease. I ended up having a second ultrasound on January 18th because at the first miscarriage, before I started bleeding, they weren't sure if I was miscarrying or if I was just a lot earlier in my pregnancy than I thought. My nurse practitioner booked that appointment before I was able to speak to her and tell her that I was actually miscarrying, and I knew because I was bleeding and cramping. So I got that done, and it did end up saying that I had a little bit of tissue left over. I also, during this time, heard mention of there being 2 gestational sacs, but I didn't really put this information together in my brain at the time because I was just really anxious about what was going on. And it wasn't until how long ago was it? Yeah, so it was like through that week after that ultrasound that I was kind of putting the pieces together of what 2 gestational sacs would mean. And then on January 24th, I ended up talking with my nurse practitioner and was asking her about it, and it was confirmed that I was actually having twins. Well, I was supposed to be. I was miscarrying twins. I ended up naming them Lennon and Sage. Obviously, they weren't far along enough for me to know um, if they were boys or girls or not, but from my understanding, because there was two gestational sacs instead of one that they were sharing, I think confirms that they were fraternal and not identical. I'm pretty sure that's what that means. But yeah, I did end up finding out that I was supposed to have twins. Um, I also had some big blood work done, like 6+ vials of blood work done on the 23rd. Um, and most of that went pretty well. I did get one possible positive result, but I need to see a gynecologist to kind of go over that and what that means. But if it is something that needs treated and could be causing my miscarriages, from the research I've done, it's quite treatable. I continued to bleed and cramp for the entire month of January, which was something that I didn't really experience last time. Um, and ended up having to go to a clinic and then the following day to the ER, to confirm that I wasn't experiencing sepsis. I technically haven't gotten the results of that yet, but from what I can tell, that's not the case, and I don't think they would have left me this long without any answers if I was, because sepsis is a pretty big deal. Um, and what else can I give in the quick sum up? I officially stopped bleeding somewhere around the 15th, 16th of February. So I went like a month and a half, more or less, of bleeding. There was a few days in there where I didn't as much, and for a lot of it, it was just spotting, but yeah, a month and a half of bleeding. Um, and I'm currently still waiting to see a gynecologist, and while we're waiting, we're also gonna wait um, to try again for another baby. Because if I have something going on, that's just going to keep causing me more miscarriages. I don't want to keep doing that if it's treatable. Like, if it's not treatable and I just have to fight the odds, like, I'll keep trying. But if I have something treatable, I want to wait to get that treated before we try again. So that is the quick, I don't know how quick that really was, but that's a quick little update with as little detail as possible, to and have it be understandable. So I would jump out now if you're not interested in hearing more specifics. But if you are, let's go to the beginning and start all over and give you as much detail as I can. So, as we said, at the first ultrasound on January 5th was when I found out I was having my second miscarriage. Um, there's not a whole lot to say about that appointment. Essentially, I had the external ultrasound done, and then they did an internal ultrasound. And I was asked if, I was really confident on how far along I was and all of that, and I was, because I track things like very precisely. Um, and they said that they couldn't really tell me the results right now, but if they were going to be honest, it wasn't looking good. Um, and so that was that. And then 2 days after that, I started cramping and bleeding. It started off pretty light, but quickly, like over a couple days, was getting heavier. And then just 4 days after the bleeding had started was when like the big miscarriage day happened. Um, it started off with just, I was noticing just throughout that whole day um, that I was cramping and bleeding a bit more than I normally do. And I even like messaged Tristan because he was at work that day at the office and said, just a heads up, things seem to be picking up. I'm okay right now, but just be prepared in case like I ask you to come home or something like that. I just feel like today or tomorrow is gonna be the day. And then by the time he got home around supper time, I noticed that my cramps were like definitely becoming unignorable. Um, and I remember like just like curling up in a ball. And I would say for me, they were like medium to like heavy cramps. Like they weren't the worst things I ever felt. Like it wasn't like the contractions of my first miscarriage or anything, but I definitely wasn't feeling great. And then I forgot to write this down exactly, but I believe it was around 8:30. I think 8:30 maybe. Somewhere around that. I started noticing that I was having contractions. And this time I was kind of curious. I knew what I was getting myself into, I guess. And so I had a little bit more forethought. And first, I turned on a movie, Ponyo, one of my comfort movies. And then I started timing my contractions because on the pregnancy apps that I use, they have like contraction timers. And so, again, I forgot to write this down, but from what I remember, I was having contractions that lasted around 2 minutes, a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, and they were happening every 5 minutes, I think. Something around that. Maybe the time between them was a little bit shorter, but 5 minutes maximum was the break that I was getting in between these contractions. And those contractions lasted for around 20 minutes, which was really surprising to me. Um, the first time I had a miscarriage, it was so much more intense and lasted so much longer. I was really expecting something like that to be happening again, but I was just sitting here on the couch watching my movie and, breathing through it. And after the contractions were over, I probably went for about 20 minutes where, well, sorry, back up. I felt that pop again. It wasn't as dramatic as my last miscarriage when I felt that pop and then all the contractions stopped, but I did again feel that little pop, and the contractions stopped, but the cramping didn't this time. It wasn't like all the pain went away. I went back to having like medium cramps, mild to medium cramps. And then those lasted for probably around 20 minutes. And then I noticed that I felt like I was having contractions again, but they were much more mild this time um, than the big contractions. Because, like, I guess the difference for me is like when it's cramping, it's just kind of like a constant like throb or whatever. Um, they're not as intense as a contraction. But with the contractions, what I'm referring to is like a moment of big pain and then it subsides. So it's like these waves. And so I was having those waves again, but they were a lot more mild. I was able to talk through them, which I wasn't able to really do just like 20, 40 minutes prior with the bigger contractions. And these mild contractions lasted for about 30 minutes to an hour. Um, this whole process pretty much just took one playthrough of Ponyo, more or less. Maybe even a little bit less time than that. I think it was Ponyo I was watching. It might have actually been Howl's Moving Castle. That's not important, but sorry. Um, but yeah, and then it was kind of over. Obviously, I was still bleeding and whatnot quite heavily, but like the pain was pretty much over. Over the next few days, I didn't have too much cramping, but I was noticing that my cramps would continuously peak right before I was going to bed and like while I was trying to fall asleep for some reason. So that made falling asleep really difficult for like the following, I don't know, 5 to 7 days. Um, and then on the 18th, I had another ultrasound. Um, that's when I learned about the two gestational sacs, but I hadn't put it together in my brain at that time that that meant that I was having twins. I was just kind of like anxious and not really processing the information that I was being given. Um, and I was told that I still had some tissue left to pass. So I think I was just like, instead of really hearing the two gestational sacs, I was mostly just hearing that there was still tissue inside of me. Um, and that can be a concern because if I can't pass it naturally on my own, then I'd either have to go and get medication or get a D&C, which I really wasn't interested in either. And then it wasn't until the 24th of January, after having a phone call with my nurse practitioner, that I realized fully that I had had twins. And that was extremely devastating for me. Like, obviously, I was sad before, but it was almost more like just a defeated feeling previously. Like, this is happening again, um, more than this overwhelming grieving of loss, like it was with my first miscarriage. Um, but when I found out that it was supposed to be twins that I was having, it hit me all over again. I have wanted twins since I was teeny tiny. And it's been something that I've always dreamed about, and to find out that I was going to have that and it was taken away from me um was and still is honestly really really upsetting. Um I hope and I pray that I'll have the opportunity again in the future to have twins. Um, but who's to say, right? So that was a hard few days. Um, but then I feel like I missed something. Oh, we need to go back. Back to before I had found out that I was having twins. So the day after my second ultrasound, I had to go, and I thought I was just going in to get my HCG checked, but it turns out they wanted to do like a big blood test. I thought they were just being proactive, because you're not really supposed to have any recurrent miscarriage tests done until you've had 3 miscarriages. But now I've realized that this had been my third miscarriage because I miscarried both of my twins. So that's why they had started the tests, but I didn't realize that at the time. Um, so instead of getting 1 vial of blood drawn, they wanted to do 6. Um, Sorry, Mango, my cat, made a really cute noise and it distracted me. Um, the blood work on the 19th did not go well. I have a phobia of needles, and um, which I have been managing quite well. But my veins are also really finicky and they're really hard to see. Even when I take all of the necessary precautions, like eating a good meal, having lots to drink, keeping my arm in like a long sleeve to keep it nice and warm, like those things don't really help, I've learned. Um, so they often just struggle to get my blood work done. And so the 19th, it was attempted. Um, and after, like, I think maybe two pokes and them also, like, kind of fishing around with the needle in my arm, and I was getting quite worked up at that point. That they decided that we would try again in a few days. So after the weekend on the 23rd, I went back in and it was a whole ordeal. I normally have the same guy come in and do my blood work every time. Um, but because of how it went last time, he was kind of nervous, I think, to attempt it again. Um, just especially where I have that phobia. And so they sent in this older gentleman who I'm assuming is because he's more experienced in it. And he was just flabbergasted by how difficult it was to pinpoint my veins. Um, he even got like a warm, wet cloth and put them over my arms, which I had never had someone do before to like try and make them more visible. But it didn't help. Eventually, the regular nurse who does my blood work ended up coming in with the other nurse, and together they found my vein and got it going. My regular guy, he kept me like distracted, and was helping, like exchange the tubes, because there was so many. Um, and we finally got it done on the 23rd. Um, yeah. And then the following day after, yeah, was when I realized that I was having twins. Throughout this whole time, I was still bleeding, and cramping. Um, it was more of a spotting at this point, like at around the 23rd. Um, But then, on February 8th, I'm still spotting, still cramping at this point. I finally got, all of that blood work results. And so I'm just going to kind of like go over that with you. Firstly, I got the results of my HCG. That was at 5, whatever the units of measurement is, and that was close enough to 0 that my nurse practitioner was okay with us stopping blood work, because up to that point I was getting, my HCG checked once a week, and my needle phobia, it's not a fun time, so she said that was good. She noted that my prolactin levels were a little high, but she said that that could still be from the pregnancy that I was miscarrying, and that it's normal for that to take up to like 6 weeks to go back to base level. And we weren't at 6 weeks left, 6 weeks yet. So she wasn't very worried about it. And she asked if I wanted to get it rechecked, or if I just wanted to wait until I could get a gynecology, consult and get the blood work done then, because they're going to want to do more blood work probably at that point. And I just said that we would wait, at least for now. They checked my sugars, which were fine. They checked my CDC. I don't know what that is, but they said it was perfect. They checked something about my clotting, which they said was okay. They checked my thyroid, which I have medication for, and they said it was at a good level. And then they checked my ACA IgG, which is a blood test for anticardiolipin antibodies. It's associated with excessive clotting, which can affect pregnancies and cause recurrent miscarriages. And they said that I had just barely tested positive for that. Um, and so they wanted to wait for a gynecologist to decide whether or not that was something that needed to be treated. So I'm still waiting to find out about that, but I did do a little bit of research on my own. And from what I can tell, it's very treatable, and the most common treatment is aspirin and steroids. So if something was going to be wrong and causing my miscarriages, that seems like one of the easier things for it to be. So that was all good, more or less. But then, oh, and at that, like when I was talking to her on the phone with those results, she said that it was okay that I was still spotting at this point. Um, but if my spotting and cramping increased and wasn't staying the same when getting better, that would be something to possibly be concerned about and to get checked out. So literally like 3 or 4 days after that phone call, I noticed that my bleeding was changing from spotting to a proper flow, and that I was noticing I was cramping more. And by February 12th, like I was heavily bleeding. Um, I was having to change a pad like every 2 hours. And for me, like even when I'm on my period, I'm usually changing a pad like every 5 hours. Um, so I ended up calling um, 811, which is like a telephone nursing service, um, just to kind of figure out what I should do, because there was two possibilities of what was going on. Where I had been bleeding for so long, it would have been a normal time um, for me to be having my first period after the pregnancy. And so it was possible that I was just going from miscarriage to period without a break in between. Um, or the other option was that I was dealing with sepsis, which is a pretty big deal. So 811 said that it didn't sound like I needed to go to the ER like right away, but they wanted me to talk to my nurse practitioner. But it always takes a week or more to get in to talk to her, and that was like too long to wait in case something wrong was happening. So I ended up going to this new walk-in clinic, and I got there at 9:30 in the morning, and I didn't get to leave until 5 that evening, only for me to see the doctor there for about 5 minutes and have him say, "It seems like it's your period, but I can't know for sure unless you have an ultrasound. I'm actually going to be at the hospital tomorrow at around 8:30, 9 o'clock. I'm going to send your paperwork in, go to the ER, and we'll get you an ultrasound." So on the 14th, I went to the ER to get the ultrasound done. It went by very quickly. I don't know if it was because he had already sent the paperwork in or not, but I almost wish I had have just gone there instead of going to the clinic. Um, because yeah, it only took me 4 hours um, to from getting there to leaving. Um, The ultrasound seemed to have gone fine, but they said I wouldn't get the results for like 10 days. Um, and that I was free to go. So that to me said that it didn't seem like I had sepsis. I don't think they would have let me leave the hospital if there seemed to be a risk of sepsis. I can't remember what day is it. I don't know. Oh, I can check right here actually. It is the 22nd, and I haven't heard back yet from my nurse about the ultrasound. I'm pretty confident that it was my period because the bleeding stopped on February like 15th or 16th, so that was like a normal length for a period, with how like when the bleeding picked up again and when like it completely stopped, like miscarriage, everything. um so I'm pretty sure it was a period, but I have yet to actually have that confirmed. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of it. Currently, I'm still waiting to see a gynecologist. I haven't heard from one, like anybody to make an appointment yet. So I'm probably going to wait, I don't know, like 2 to 4 weeks. And if I haven't heard, I'm probably gonna call like my nurse practitioner and see if there's anything that like we can do to speed that process along. Um, because like Tris and I aren't gonna try to have another baby until we have that gynecology appointment, um, which was also recommended by my nurse practitioner to wait. Just because if I have something treatable, we want to get it treated so I don't have to go through the experience of a miscarriage again. Um, but if I have something that is not treatable, then we'll start the adoption process. And I'm still going to try to have a baby. Like, there's lots of people who are told that they're infertile or that they can't have a baby and then end up having one. So, like, I'm not going to stop trying, but I want to wait and see if it's treatable before I put myself through that again. Also, the neighbor's dog is barking, so I'm not sure if you can hear that, but my apologies. But yeah, that's really a sum up. Like I said earlier, we named the babies Lennon and Sage. Um, I'm getting a tattoo to like as a memorial for them on the 28th. Um, I'm getting like right here, I'm getting like a blackbird for Lennon, and then sprigs of sage for Sage, obviously. Um, Emotionally, I'm coping well, keeping myself busy, doing lots of hobbies. It's sad, obviously, but I try not to dwell too hard on it, and just keep having hope that my time will come. Um, yeah, that's kind of it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, or if you know me personally, feel free to reach out and message me. I'm an open book. Um, if you have gone through or are currently going through a miscarriage, I'm really sorry for your loss. And if you need support, also please reach out. It's a really hard time, especially to be alone. Um, so just remember that you're not, and that there are people that understand what you're going through. So, yeah, this will be my last video until my next pregnancy, I suppose. So I'll talk to you then. Bye.